So back with another podcast. You're driving, of course. So if you hear a lot of noise in the background, it's just vehicles. But that being said, I think a tool that parents can use to help when kids are young is to obviously use religion, use school, use structure, use routine. One of the things that I think are important for children is positive feedback. Consequences are really important to me. Rewards, so action and reaction, understanding that logic, like everything you do has an effect on someone next to you, yourself, your environment, and sometimes those effects have negative or positive effects that are returned. Like you water the grass, it grows. But if you torch a tree, it'll burn, right? So there's positive and negative effects based on your reactions, right? That being said, those are horrible examples, but there's another thing that I want to talk about that helps, and I've never really thought about it. I have 4 kids already. I've named them all already. I think we picked good names. But just because we were just focusing on naming them with a letter that starts with one of the letters that their parents' names is from, right? For whatever reason, that's what we wanted to do. And if, in our opinion or in our mindset, it helps connect us more as a family. We all share the same last name. We all share the same initials. And it makes us more unique to each other, right? More clan-like. But that being said, there's another level to it. And this is going to be a wild thing to say. I don't know that I would have the courage to name a son this. But having a very powerful name, I think, helps with positive outlook. No matter how ridiculous the name still stands for something. And if you reiterate that name, and they're hearing that name constantly, every single day, it helps lift them up, build them up. I'll give you the names. And me and my friends talk about this. Me and my coworkers talk about this. And there's actually 2 kids who were born in Hillside that have these names. And I applaud the mother, man, or the father that came up with these names. So name number 1 is God's will. And then name number 2 is God's power, right? The names sound like they could be ridiculous. They're not in my opinion. They're powerful names. Like you are God's will. So hey, what's your name? I'm God's will. So that sentence comes out of their mouth they're just saying like, I'm Alex, right? But I'm Alex is just saying that that's your name. It's no real action, right? There's no action behind the name. When he introduces himself as I'm God's will, he's not only telling you his name is God's will, he's also saying out loud that he, the being, was God's will. And there's nothing more powerful than that, right? Except God's power. So now his brother introduces, right? If you name one kid God's will, you better come up with a good name for the next one, God's power. And if they had a third, it better be God's speed. Because I think the names are so powerful. He says to you, I'm going to say, hey, my name's Alex, what's your name? And he's going to say, I'm God's power. Which is an amazing thing to hear out loud. Like, as ridiculous as other people may think these names are, or as like outlandish or unusual, let's just say, right? I think they're such great names. He reminds himself that he himself is the power of God. What your brother is the will of God. And when you have the power of God or the will of God behind you, what can't you accomplish? Now, I don't know. I haven't followed up with these kids. I don't know what they've accomplished. I don't know where they turned out or turned up or where they ended up in their lives. But for me, it's irrelevant in terms of the theory that I'm pushing. I think it's important to pick names that are powerful. Now, some people say like a name like, for example, Alex, simple name. But if you look up the Celtic name for it or you look up like a biblical definition, they'll say something like Gabriel, right? The messenger, Alex, the guardian of man. Like there's like thing. And some people take a lot of pride in that. And I think that if you can add a little bit of pride to the name, then when they hear their names, you can remind them, you're not just anyone. You're the protector of people. You're not just anyone, you are the messenger. You're God's messenger, right? Like God's messenger. You're not just anyone. You are hope. You are passion. You are joy. You are good feelings. You know what I mean? And like, I never really put that much weight into the names. I was being corny maybe, I don't know. But my whole thing with the names and my wife was, we'll keep it as clan-like as possible. Like, we are going to be together forever. And even when they go off, they will always feel a very strong affinity for where they came from. Like I do, I have a strong affinity for where I came from. It has nothing to do with my name. My last name, yes, but not my first name. But it's because we were brought in almost like, and I don't want to call it cult-like, but a system where you were either in or out, right, in my family. And if I tattled on my brother, I'd get punished, my brother would get punished. No one got punished extra. If my brother tattled on me, I'd get punished, my brother got punished. So there was no winner in tattling. So we were encouraged to not tattle, just resolve the situation ourselves. And which we did a lot. And my brother and I, maybe not so much these days, and I kind of miss it, but my brother and I were clan-like, where we would go to battle with each other. Obviously, constantly brothers, right? But if anyone interjected or tried to get involved, even pick a side, we would turn on that person. And what I mean by pick a side, it's not opinion-based. Because, young boys, we like to fight when we're young. So we would fight, and if anyone were to step in and let's just say throw a punch at my brother because they were unhappy with how my brother was treating me, that's it. Now me and my brother we would turn on this kid. You can't get involved. You can't attack, can't strike my brother. And same thing, same relative concept, where if they turned on me, my brother would be like, you need to step away and step out before you get beat up by both of us. This is our problem, not yours. I think we'll just walk away and let us handle it. So that was one example. Other examples is like I said, workforce was, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say this out loud because like professionally, I'm a physical therapist. I'm a father of 4. I don't like saying these things, but when I was younger, my brother and I, we've gotten into a couple of scuffles. And a couple, I would say, is like more than a handful. It's not like 5 fights I've had in my life. I've had a couple. When I say fights, I don't mean wrestling only. I mean like, kicks, punches, ugly things when we were growing up. But we resolved it. We resolved it like mature people and adults as much as we could, being kids, right? Being children. But one of the big rules or stigmas that we would stick to is you mess with my family, you mess with me. And if you are against my brother, you're against me, right? To get to him, you got to go through me. All these like corny sayings that you hear, they were real though. And I miss that. So the point of my podcast today is like naming your children may help build that in the home. So how you name them can help build that connection with each other, like God's will and God's power. They're God's might. Together, they're God's might. They're God's everything. Nothing can beat them, right? And so they can maybe grow together. People may make fun of them for their names, and the one brother would be like, they're just jealous. Who wouldn't want to be called God's power, right? Something like that. Or who wouldn't want to be called God's will? You're the will of God, and he's just jealous. Like so little examples like that. And I'm not saying you have to name your kids something like that, specifically that. But I am saying like you can name them something like an Alexander, a Joseph, a Gabriel, an Isaiah, like something. And I'm using men's names because women is a little bit harder, I think. But name them something that will have a symbol to them that they can refer to and teach them about it. And they can refer back and say, I'm not hopeless. I'm not lost. I'm not pathetic. I can come up from this. And I think that plays a huge role in their upbringing, along with obviously rearing your kids properly. You can name them God's will, God's power, and then beat the crap out of these kids and never teach them anything and show them no love and then really talk them down. And the amount of abuse or negative feedback would definitely overpower a great name. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying every little bit counts. And in the society that we're growing up in now, there is this like lost generation. And I would say like people born in the 80s and early 90s got to experience like life before technology and life with technology, and in adulthood got hit with like very advanced technology, but we're already mature enough to know how to handle it. The generation that came after, let's just call it late 90s, 2000s, 2010s, they got obliterated with high tech, almost like removing all thinking, all process of elimination, all like problem solution finding, or like understanding how to like navigate out of a situation, because technology would make it very easy. Like if I wanted to see my friend, I'd either have to plan way ahead or go visit them at their house. Couldn't call them, it wasn't a thing. Or I could call the landline, but then I'd have to say, hi, Mrs. Esposito, is Johnny home? And then I would say, can I speak to Johnny? So I'd have to know how to talk to an adult before I start talking like a fool to a friend. So you learn these little things. Whereas a kid now, you can just text like, yo, you want to hang out? And it can be slang. You never really learn how to deal with adults because you can kind of like go over them. You can hit direct access to your friends. And then there's even secret ways to do it, where now you can send videos and text and images that are completely inappropriate. Adults would definitely cut it out, and you don't have to kind of like soften the blow. You don't learn these tricks anymore. But that being said, I'm going to get back to my topic, is that I think it's important in any way that you can, whether by words, by actions, by naming your kids, that you find ways to help your kids feel really freaking proud to be themselves, and really proud to be part of your family, and really proud to be siblings, or to have the siblings they have. If they have this inner confidence, this inner beauty, this inner strength about like, I have the best life, I have the best family, I have the best parents, I have the best name, I am so happy with the school I go to, I'm so happy with the friends I made, everyone loves me, and it's because obviously they love themselves, and they're not saying negative things about themselves or whining about the unfairness of life, right? And I think it helps them in the future. And now it goes on to the second part of my podcast. I'm done with this one, but we'll talk about it in the next podcast, is like confidence, and how a lot of people confuse confidence with arrogance. And then, I mentioned this in an old podcast. I don't know if I still have it, but it's just about like when people are always complaining about life, and then depending who you are, you can say your aura, your vibe, your vibrations, you're signaling negativity because negative attracts negative, right? There's that way, but there's other ways too, like just being pessimistic and not finding solutions keeps you stuck in a rut. And if you don't, have open ears, open eyes to positive feedback, then you're going to stay stuck in that rut, right? So, but that's for another podcast. Today, I just wanted to talk about like how I think it's so incredibly important to find little tricks. I'll call them tricks to convince your kids of their own greatness.